Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Back2Basics. I am Moe ElHussini, and I am here with my good friend, George Elias. George, welcome to the podcast, buddy.
Hey, thanks, Mo. Welcome to you too. It's a lot of fun doing these podcasts. What's on your mind?
Nothing, man, just enjoying the week and enjoying the sunshine, and I'm excited about it. So I've been thinking about this topic, interviewing, and all the different venues that we can take with it. But yeah, no, nothing really, nothing specific. I'm just looking forward to continuing the discussion. What about you? Anything major going on?
Me too. Not too much. Just a really beautiful day outside. Maybe after the podcast, I'll go for a nice run or something.
Good for you. Good for you. Good for you. Look, George, I think last time when we were talking about interviewing and we said we're going to continue talking about interviewing, and as you put it, when we were talking before we started recording, how someone could nail the interview, which I think was a really good way to word it, because that is exactly what we all say in our mind when we're walking into that conference room or that building, that we want to nail this interview. I think we stopped at talking about, or we said we're going to start the dialogue today, the discussion talking about legal issues. But there's one thing I wanted to bring up, right? And I wanted to hear your thoughts about it. I was talking with a couple of listeners that listen to this podcast, and one of them asked me if we rehearse this before we actually have the podcast, if we rehearse the dialogue. And because they were questioning why we disagree on some things that we talk about. And I told them the whole point is that we agree on some things and disagree on some things. We don't rehearse any of this. We don't plan it ahead of time. There's no script written about, all right, George, you say this, I say this. I actually enjoy it more when we disagree on things. And I told the listener, I told her that it was actually a gentleman and a lady. I told them the whole point is that when we do disagree, we're simply presenting my point of view, your point of view. It's not about me convincing you to agree with me or vice versa. It's more about having the listener listen to all points of view available that we can present and leave it up to them to formulate their own opinions. What do you think, George, or what do you want to add to this point?
I think the only thing that I'll add to that, and I agree with you, Mo. The only thing I'll add to that, and if somebody's interested in the process, Mo and I discuss the topic, and somebody will even discuss what the next topic is going to be. We do discuss prior to the podcast who's going to open up, who's going to close. So general like administrative stuff. We might even bring up, hey, I really want to make sure we hit this angle or this topic. So we do discuss some very broad talking points, but I honestly, there's really no script here, and I'm often quite surprised by what comes out of Mo's mouth. So it's all in good fun.
Yeah. Yeah, same here. And I mean, I think in the first podcast we had given a background about myself and George, but I have known George since 1995, and we have had a great many discussions where 99.999% of them we have opposing or different points of view. So we just got used to it, where we talk back and forth about things that we agree or disagree on. So again, to sum up this point, just in general, I wanted to let people know that, yes, I respect George's points of view. I learned a great deal from him, and he knows that throughout my life over the past 30 years, I've learned so much from him. So I actually enjoy it when we disagree, because he opens up my mind to blind spots that I don't think about. And that's my whole intention, or our intention, is that when the listener listens to myself and George, they come up with their own thought process or own ideas. So, George, shall we continue now? Why don't you, I'm going to give you the mic. because this is a really, and I was looking forward to talking about this point, legal issues and problematic questions, meaning what are, instead of do's and don'ts, what are some of the don'ts that we should focus on in an interview?
Well, first, let's just go back a little bit. Let's just talk about the legal issues from an interviewer's perspective, right? And this is kind of still talking about what it's like to get in there from an interviewer, but you know, these are some pitfalls. So one of the things is you need to be very careful when you get an applicant in, whether they're in person or over the phone. There really are certain topics that, you know, here, I'll just tell you, I'll speak for the state of New Jersey. And again, we're not lawyers. We're really just practitioners. So if you need legal advice, go get a lawyer, right? But, you know, we're going to say, just from a legal perspective, you can ask certain things in an interview that you may or may not think are perfectly innocent, and you could get yourself into some legal hot water. You could actually get sued for asking certain questions that, you know, the state of New Jersey and U.S. really considers to be unfair and really irrelevant in the workplace. So I'll just give you an example, right?
Give some examples. Start with a couple.
So it is a bad idea in an interview, and could get into some legal issues if you ask somebody their race, color, national origin, religion, or really anything to do with that. So that's just topics to avoid. Don't ask them where do they go to church. Don't ask them what language they speak at home. It's irrelevant for the workplace, and it can give somebody a lot of ammunition to go after you after the interview.
And you know what, George, it's interesting. I'm going to just zoom in on one of them. What language do you speak at home? Yes, there are some jobs that require, if you go apply at the UN, they want somebody that's multilingual, and they may ask you, what language are you fluent in? What's your native language? What's your proficiency in a specific language? Sometimes the wording matters, right? Depending upon the job that you're applying to. But to George's point, that does not mean that you can ask someone about their race, about their color, about their religion by properly, quote unquote, wording it in a different way. No, there's some things that you should steer away from. But I think personally, there are some questions. For example, the only one that sticks in my mind is language. If the job role does dictate a specific language, that you could ask about it properly. Like George said, I would not go and say, "Hey, what language do you talk about when you're having dinner in front of the TV with your family?" Right? You don't word it like that. There's a better way to say it. But again, the wording does matter as well. That's the point I think I'm trying to make.
Yeah, absolutely. So the point is, you know, let's say you're hiring somebody to do business in South America, and you know, part of the job description is Spanish language fluency, right? Asking them about their fluency and experience with Spanish, right? If they have a native level fluency, or a very technical fluency, and asking them, how well they can speak, and maybe even having a Spanish conversation during the interview, so you could hear their accent, and I would say even more important, if they have to act as a translator, right? Asking them for certain certifications as a translator, that's perfectly fine. But then saying something, did you grow up speaking Spanish, and is that your preferred language? And do you speak Spanish at home? Why, that there's a very big difference.
That's exactly what I mean. Yep. I agree with you 100%. And since you mentioned South America, George, I want to point something out to the listeners. We are speaking, our podcast today is discussing the do's and don'ts in interviewing in the US. And I'll tell you why I mentioned this, everybody. if you go apply for a job in the Middle East, for example, or in the Gulf area, you will face job postings. You will see them. It's perfectly normal for a company to ask in a job posting, looking for a female that is presentable, that is a specific religion between the age of 25 and 30. We're not saying it's right or wrong, and we're not posing our own opinion on whether or not that is acceptable or not, but we're trying not to be parochial, right? We're not looking at things from our point of view in the US. Right now, this podcast is about interviewing in the US. The point I'm trying to make is that in other countries, you may face situations that is the total opposite of what we're talking about today, right now, myself and George, right? I've seen job postings that ask questions. If this company was in the US, they would be all over CNN, right? It would be a viral discussion on social media. So we're putting that aside for now. We're focusing on people applying and posting in the US, and that's the discussion. We can have maybe another discussion about international interviewing later on, but right now we're in the US world. So what else, George?
Yeah.
Any other points that come up?
Oh yeah, I mean there's a ton of them. I would say that it's totally avoid anything about gender or what sex somebody is, or
Yes.
sexual orientation, gender identity. I mean, it might be a big topic going on in the news, and it might be interesting and something to contemplate, or something you might want to talk about with your friends, or somebody that you're romantically involved in. But in an interview, not the right thing to bring up. I would not ask somebody if they're part of some community, or if I would not ask somebody which bathroom they're going to be using at the workplace.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That totally inappropriate.
Agreed. Thank you, George. Is there anything else you want to add? I know in the last podcast, up until this point, we were talking about from the interviewer's perspective. Is there anything you want to add before we switch now over to the applicant's perspective?
Yeah, I'll just add three more, and we'll round it out, right? So age. So don't ask people their age. Don't ask people about if they're disabled, or why they're in the wheelchair or anything like that, how'd they get there. Don't ask a young lady if she's pregnant, right? I mean, I wouldn't, because I'd probably guess wrong and totally embarrass myself. It's just not something that I'm really good at. But it is not something to ask. Don't even ask if they intend on getting pregnant. That if you have a young lady or someone who's early in career, don't ask them, hey, do you intend on getting married one day and having a baby? That is totally inappropriate. I wouldn't ask anything about that. And again, just want to round it out, Mo, we're not lawyers. If before you go interview, there's lots of resources out there on what not to say during an interview. Even if you're a mom and pop store or small business, it's a good idea to look them up and know what not to say in an interview. And quite frankly, from an interviewee's perspective, it's good to have an idea of what are the out of bounds questions, so you don't lead somebody into asking those things, or having an uncomfortable conversation where someone's going to say, listen, I really don't want to talk about your religion during the interview, because they're going to, like, if somebody started bringing up religion during an interview, I would probably listen. And if they asked me something, I would say, I really don't have an opinion on your religion. I would just say, can we talk about something more relevant? I would try to change the question.
Yes. And I know a question, it's kind of like the big elephant in the room that comes across a lot of my clients in coaching. When it comes to these points that you mentioned, they tell me, well, Mo, listen, but my job requires a forklift operator or somebody that can handle lifting boxes that are X amount of pounds heavy every day. Or I need somebody that does really know how to deal with people in a specific country, and it would be great if they're native born from there. How do I know this stuff? Or I need somebody that's going to be around. If I'm going to pay for their training, I need to know that this person is going to be around for a year. Yeah, okay, I'm not a big IBM company. I'm a small mom and pop company that employs 9 people. And if this person is going to come and get pregnant in a month or two, that's going to disrupt my business. We know all those things, but there is a level of agreed upon respect and privacy that needs to be shared between the employee and the employer, or in this case, between the employer and the employee. So some challenges, some obstacles may come up when a business owner is interviewing a candidate, or things might come up after that candidate accepts the job, but it's the nature of the world that we live in. There's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. That is my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think that there are interview questions that you can ask. Like the forklift operator, you can ask them about their experience operating a forklift and when they've done it before. And you can ask them things. Hey, at this job, you'll be required to lift boxes or things that are 30 pounds. Is that something that you think you'll be able to do? Right. So
yes.
you can ask. You can ask, for particular requirements. You'll be asked to climb up ladders. Is that something you're comfortable with, right? So there's certain things. You can even ask them, are you aware of how to set up a ladder safely, right? That's a great question, right?
Yep.
Tell me the process of setting up a ladder safely so you can climb it. Like, what would you be concerned with? That's a great open-ended question if they're going to be using ladders all the time. So.
Agreed. So to sum that part up, I think, yes, the wording matters. How you ask, it goes back to the question is half the answer. Just, be careful with how you you pose your questions to the candidates. All right. Now let's switch. And George, did I cut you off? Did you want to say anything else?
No, I'm good with talking about from the applicants. I mean, let's switch over. We probably don't have a lot of time to talk about that, but I think it's a good topic to cover.
Okay. So interviewing from the applicant's perspective. What should be the main concern on the applicant's mind when they're applying for a job?
So here's the thing. I think maybe much earlier in my career, when I look at my approach to interviewing, I think my approach to interviewing was to get an offer, right? Like, my main thing is I really wanted to get an offer. And I look back, and there's times where I actually didn't get the offer. Well, I'll just be clear. And I actually, looking back, I'm thankful that I didn't get the offer. And looking back at the interview and the dynamics and what was said, I really thought to myself, wow, I probably got lucky on that one, right? Because I might have said yes. So I think that an applicant really should also think about how they are going to interview the company that they're going into. Is this the right job for them? Is this a good fit for them? So I don't think you should go in there with the mindset that you're the one being interviewed and being scrutinized, and it's not like acceptance rejection, because there's a world where maybe you should reject that job. I mean, I've actually been offered jobs as well, and I've told them, during the interview, I learned some things that I don't think this is the job for me. Thank you for the offer, but I can't say yes.
So in other words, George, it's not all just about the financial part of the job. There's how you fit in the company. How does the culture of the company how much do you agree or disagree with it, the nature of the job. There's other attributes, other factors that one should consider and look for in the interview, besides just I'm going to be making X amount per year, per month, and so on, right? There's other areas that we need to consider as well.
Well, so Mo, I don't want to be completely callous. I mean, it is there's a financial aspect, and I completely understand somebody that's saying, hey, I need the job, right? I've got kids at home, you know, I have responsibilities, I have a mortgage, right? I need to get a job. I'm getting thrown out of my mom's house, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm not being callous, but I think if you go in into a job, you know, hungry and desperate, I think that's not a good stance.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you.
Right?
Yeah. And I wasn't posing the question that I disagree with you. I was actually agreeing with you that yes, I mean, you could get a job that making 100,000 a year, but then there may be another job that you can interview for where you'll be making 85, but there's an opportunity to grow within 3 years to make 150, right? Because they have like a clear path to develop you and grow you to advance career wise. So no, I agree with you. There's a lot more questions that we need to ask when we are in interview to find out. Yes, everybody, most of us, yes, a key motivator or a key point is how much we would make and having that stability that you're talking about. But what we're saying is that there may be some other primary or secondary things that we should consider when we're evaluating a job for ourselves.
So let me ask, you know, I'll kind of case in point a little bit. So when I was interviewing for a job, and I was early in career, it's actually my first job out of school, I was very interested in a company that would support me in getting my master's. So
yeah, there you
actually
go.
this particular company, you know, during the interview, the HR a person that interviewed mentioned tuition reimbursement and you know things of that nature. So I was really interested in it. So when I was talking to the hiring manager, I mentioned the hiring manager that I'm very interested in getting my MBA or going for my master's degree, and I'll put the hard work into it. And I just wanted to make sure that that's something that would be supported by the company. And her reaction was like, gee, I really don't know. Or what if I need to call you? And what if you need to work extra hours? Then you can't go to class. And then she said, you know, around here, we like to start at like 10 o'clock and we like to go into 7. Well, you just make sure, you know, your courses don't need you to be there before 7 o'clock. And I remember, I ended up not getting that interview. We could talk about why that was later in my analysis of it one day. But I look back, I'm like, I'm glad I didn't get an offer. I mean, me and her were definitely on 2 different pages. I was looking for personal growth, and she was looking for something else.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean, George. I know what you mean. You know what else comes to my mind now that we're talking about this from the applicant's perspective? I'm thinking what to get that clarification that we're seeking from a job when we're evaluating it. What questions would I ask as an applicant? And you know what's always the first question that comes to my mind, George? I don't know why. I know it's not the most important one, but one question that comes to my mind is I always like to know what the manager that I will be reporting to, what his or her title is, so I can compare it to mine. And I'll tell you what I mean. I've been in this, I'd like to call it maybe like a corporate track, where I got a really, really good job as an assistant manager, and the person I was reporting to was a manager, right? Meaning for me to grow, there was really no room for me, because the next promotion I would get would be a manager, and I'm not going to be equal to my manager in the same team. He manages 4 people. I'm an assistant. The only way I would move up is if that person quits, retires, gets promoted, or moves. So I found that it's always, if there's some latitude where I'm, for example, hired as an assistant manager, and the person I will report to is a director or a senior director, I can kind of theoretically visualize that there's room for me to grow, that my direct manager will not be threatened by me trying to develop or move up the corporate ladder, right? There's some room for me to grow within that role. So I always found that asking that question and asking to look at the org chart where I fit in the team and within the whole structure, right? It helps me visualize that, 5-year plan question in my head. Where can I go in this company?
So I think and this is just a difference of approach, Mo. I've during interviews I've asked very directly, what is the career path for somebody that excels at this position, right? I've directly asked them about the career path. And the reason why I like to ask directly and not just see it and try to find out what the titles are is, if you're in a large matrix organization, there might be multiple career paths, meaning not just taking your boss's job. Now, having said that, I did ask that during an interview once, and the lady looked right at me and she's like, well, gee, I guess you would take my job. And at that point, I realized that,
and that's why I bring it up.
maybe
Yeah.
maybe I intimidated her a little bit, but actually, I learned a lot from that question. I realized that there wasn't much of a career path, and that my next step was to take her job. So she'd have to get promoted or leave for me to move on, and that's again probably why I'm glad I didn't get that job. But
yeah.
I really do think if you're interested in career path, asking questions about org chart, hierarchy, structures, what would a career path, does the company support, some career path planning, right? I think all those are really good questions.
Yeah, and I mean, this is more of it's more of an org behavior question or more of a management question that comes to my mind is, do you really think if you're a manager and your direct manager is a senior manager, that senior manager would really sincerely, truly help you grow to be a senior manager or above in another department? I know it's not a discussion for what we're talking about, but that kind of what comes to my mind when we talk about career paths. There's one thing that comes up in interviews to, sell you the job if they really want you, but then there's that reality that you face when you're in the real actual job, right, with somebody that you may be reporting to that's threatened by your success, by your education, by your expertise. They may act as an inhibitor or a limitation to you growing even laterally outside of that department. That's kind of what I think about, or the reason why this comes to my mind. But
yeah, I think asking about career paths and hierarchies are good. I would also think, a great question to ask is, what's a typical day? What would a typical day look like for me if I get this job, right? I mean,
yes.
you really need to ask, open-ended, just like we talked about, interviewers needed to ask open-ended questions. I would ask the interviewer open-ended questions. I would ask them what a typical day would look like for me. I would ask them if they like working there. I would say, do you like working here? What's the best thing about working here? I mean, I would actually ask that, because if some people might honestly say, no, I don't. That would be a huge warning sign. I'd be running out of there. I'm like, okay, interview over.
Yep. And the other way around too, you could switch the table, turn the table around. Like, we all know when we get this dreaded question, tell me the worst thing about yourself, or why should I not hire you? Ask the same question to the interviewer. What is it that you do not like about the company? If they tell you nothing, it's unrealistic. So sometimes it helps to say, what is it about this company that you do not like? What is it about your job that you do not like? What is it about your department that you do not like? Or if you want to be more professional and less confrontational, I always ask, what are the challenges that the team is facing right now? Right, it shows that you do want to be part of that team, or what are the challenges that this department is facing right now? Right, you're kind of laying out, okay, you know what, Mr. Interviewer, we all know this is not a perfect world. There's no perfect companies. I know you probably love your job, but we can agree that there may be some things that we do not like here. What are they? So you're kind of like, cornering them to tell you some of the things that are not good within the team, within the department, within the company.
Yeah, I definitely get, getting the interviewer to talk, I think is good. If there's an important trait that you have, or a certain personality trait that you have that you feel very strongly about, then that's also something to ask the interviewer. I would not be shy about asking things like, for instance, hey, I really prefer working in a team. Our team, like, how's the team environment here? And
good question.
Do people support each other in the team? Or even conversely, you could say to the interviewer, hey, I'm a really great worker when I get time to think and put my mind to it. And team distractions are something that I don't deal very well with. Is that okay if I get assignments that I can work alone on them? That's where I work the best. And I'm just saying that, that if you feel very strongly about the way you work, finding out from the interviewer if they'll support you in having your best work mode, I would be okay with that.
Agreed. And I really like the direction we're going with this podcast, George. I know, because we're almost out of time. Why don't we continue talking about the applicant's perspective, and maybe continue next podcast talking about some interviewing tips that can help the applicant before, during, after the interview? Shall we do that?
I think that sounds great, Mo. Sorry, I can't help getting into the story sometimes.
No, man. No. It's good. I didn't mean to cut you off. They're all good, valid points. I hope this was helpful for everybody. George, if you don't have anything else to add, shall we kind of like maybe end it here now?
Yeah, I think it's good. Thanks for the conversation, Mo. I think, we really went into this very well. And next time we'll just discuss about interviewing tips, maybe something at a very practical, tactical level, even, not just in generalities.
Sounds good.
So, well, thank you all for listening to this episode of Back to Basics on the Business Edge, brought to you by Feliciano School of Business at Montclair State University. We hope you enjoyed this podcast and welcome any feedback you have for us, including suggestions for future topics.
Thank you, George, and thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you next time on the next Back to Basics podcast. Take care, everybody.
Take care. See you next time, Mo.
See you, George.